It's Vancouver's podcast on the Canada's Podcast Network.
Hi, this is Angela Barnard coming to you from Canada's podcast at the Vancouver Island Economic Summit. I am super excited to have Mark Smith here from Query Technologies Corporation. So let's get straight into it. Mark, tell me a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey.
It's a long one, and it didn't start out as an entrepreneurial path. I actually started out in a very, I started out in the music industry.
Oh.
And it was probably my best business lessons in life came out of that industry.
Wow.
Unbeknownst to me, but I was on a path to basically earn a lot of money by the time I was 30. And of course, life changed. I ended up in another business because I thought that could get me there, working for somebody. And about a year into that, in a discussion with the owner of that company at the time, after about 20 minutes, I realized that I had talked myself out of a job and found my first investor into my first company. So
Okay.
that worked out okay. I was in that business for about 3 years, won't bore you with the details. We were in the office product sector, and it was, because I'm dating myself because I'm old, it was in Vancouver, and I just done a deal for private label products for my products. And I was standing in Costco in Lake City and Burnaby, which was the first Costco in Western Canada. And I'm looking up on the shelf, and they're selling copy paper for better than the wholesale deal I had cut.
Huh.
So it was just before the big box revolution, and I went, I don't think this is going to end well. So I sold my business, had an opportunity to come to Vancouver Island on August 1st, 1995. I'm still here. Wasn't sure. I was doing some consulting at the time. Looked around. My wheelhouse is really business development. Met a whole bunch of people in an emerging technology space in Victoria. Put together a business consultancy helping tech products really get to market. And that's everything from software to consulting. Did that for 10 years. Ended up back in the private sector. Another long story for about 10 years. A few years back, it's like, no, this is all great. I was digging the paycheck, but it's like, this was not me. So I wanted to go back out, which is exactly what I did. So we fired up Query Technologies Corp about 4 years ago.
Okay.
The vision was, because I've lived that dream of building software and raising the money and crossing your fingers and hope that you make enough money to get that investment back. Technology's changed, agile builds, you can do things collaboratively with customers, a whole bunch of different circumstances. So the vision was that we would identify opportunities, but we would partner up or joint venture with companies. So we'd own and control some of the intellectual property, but we weren't taking all of the risk. Like any other business, it always takes longer to kind of get to that market. And along the way, and because I'm lucky enough to have a pretty extensive network on Vancouver Island, lots of folks that I know started me asking, hey, are you still doing consulting? And it's like, no. But I'm a startup business and cash flow always is okay. So we went down that path, but as opposed to going out in the traditional world of consulting and define that any way you see fit, we led with customer experience. So I've really built a North American network, part of this thing called the CX Accelerator in Nashville, which is a whole group of thought leaders in the customer experience space. And as a result of that, all of the products and tools that we're building, we're designing to support those efforts. And at the end of the day, customer experience is really an emerging piece, specifically in Canada. Companies don't necessarily have it on their agenda. They don't necessarily have the resource to hire a chief customer officer. So we can kind of fit the bill in Canada. And then we come along, and our job is, as opposed to consult, is to coach and train, and in a perfect world, leave some of our tools behind that drive value. So that's the background.
Let's talk about an applied application.
Okay.
Can you talk about, are you allowed to talk about one of the companies that you're working with?
Yeah, absolutely.
From idea to what it is that you're producing?
Yeah, so we're involved with a company out of San Francisco.
Okay.
Drisham AI. Drisham is Sanskrit for vision. That's where the name of that company, and I would like to know that background because I asked that. I had no idea what that meant. And my partners, folks we're working with in San Francisco would say that we're in the machine learning space.
Okay.
AI, you can wrap whatever you want to do around that. The genesis of the idea was really taken from facial recognition software. We've taken it one step further. We're in the product identification space. So imagine you have a tap. You can just hold up that. We can take a picture, and we can automatically tell you what that product number is. Iteration 2 is, imagine if it was a tap, hypothetically, and I'm saying that because we have a large enterprise brand that I can't talk about as a customer, but they're monumental. But now, so we can take a picture, tell you what the product is. If you were the plumber, it could also give you the parts list, because you might know that I need to fix this, but I might need the cartridge. So now when you run down to Home Depot. So the product identification space, we're the classic startup that had a clear path on, we were going to chase a healthcare market because our co-founder came out of the healthcare vertical. We saw this whole big opportunity. Somebody knew somebody who knew somebody. They were in the plumbing industry. They went, hey, we believe you could solve this problem. And to tie it all back to the customer experience space, at the end of the day, this particular company, big company, has lots of metrics, knows all of their costing. When you call in their call center and they now go, hey, by the way, because they know they spent 7 to 10 minutes trying to figure out what we're talking about.
Right. Now
they just go, hey, do you have a smartphone, Angie? And you go, yep. And you can now shoot them an image. And on average, we took 3 minutes, almost 3 minutes off a phone call. So our business case is actually, we're not a
time
cost.
Saving.
We're time saving, better customer experience, so all that. So there's the common thread. We can tie all that back. So we actually don't go and talk about technology. It's about, hey, we're trying to improve the lives of your customers. How do you make it easier to do business with you?
So you talked about, you have a client that we can't talk about, but who's big corporate.
Yep, correct.
How can that translate into, say, small business, medium-sized business,
the product specifically?
Accessible? No, the customer experience, time-saving technology that you're building, how can it be relevant to
well, I think the example I would
businesses?
lay out, I think it applies to all business. Because when I say customer experience and I start talking to folks, and the technology standpoint is they're thinking, oh, it's my point of sale system, or it's some inventory management system. First and foremost, customer experience is much higher level than customer service. So it's about people thinking about your brand even before they get to your store or phone your business, and it's the after. Now
Service.
I've done this, and if it's required, or hey, I had this great experience, I'm going to go tell my friends. We often get into organizations and they think the problem's here, but then all of a sudden it's like, well, if we could fix this. And interestingly enough, we spend a lot of time fixing billing departments and helping automate out, because there, when you actually start to talk to people in their organization, but their customers, 9 times out of 10, their single biggest pain point with the company is, think about cell phone companies. I can't figure out my bill.
Right.
We've all spent hours with providers who shall remain unnamed, and it's like, when I get the supervisor on the phone and you can't explain your bill to me, don't you think that's a monumental problem for your customers?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think it's everywhere.
What I love about kind of your approach in business for Query is that you're coming from the customer experience lens, right? Which is, if you could translate to every business to come from, okay, so internally, functionally, technically we have these issues to run the business, but we're trying to wow the customer, right? At the end of the day, if we have a great customer experience, you don't have to worry about competing, right? You don't have to worry about value. The value proposition is in the experience, right? So 100%. I love that. I love that.
I am going to, and I'm not going to challenge you on your commentary because you're bang on, but it's interesting that you utilize that terminology of wow the customer. And I say to our clients all the time, if I go into Starbucks this morning and they know my name because they happen to, the one I go to all the time, and I walk in and I have that great experience because that barista knows me and all of that, that's fantastic. What studies show, big business, little business, what customers really want, maybe the coffee's a bad example, is for companies to be consistent all the time.
Yes.
And where we hang in, when you start taking process behind that, it's as simple as I can talk to somebody and they go, well, I went to Starbucks today and I always get a Pike Place roast.
Great coffee.
But they were out today. So of that particular brand or that blend, so it's like, so is that the barista's fault? And when you then look organizationally, it's like, well, actually their systems are automated to order. So maybe they're out at the warehouse. Maybe the guy forgot to place the order. So you can go all the way through the company. So in the experience piece, all of the touch points before you get there and after, that makes up the whole experience. Because when you study, there's this amazing study out there, Forrester Research did, and every year they take 500 of the top companies that are leaders in their verticals and sectors, and they talk to the CEOs and they go, so how's everything going? Oh, it's fantastic. How are your customer satisfaction? Oh, it's fantastic. And every year it's like, they guesstimate 85 to 90% of their customers are ecstatic. And then they take 1,000 of those companies' top customers and basically ask them the same question. And on average, it's like less than 10%. Like
Wow.
there is it's
Total
not like this
disconnect
little
from
disconnect.
what their perception is to
Total
reality.
disconnect.
Right,
So
right,
it's
right.
like, and I just want to not end, but
Yeah.
to jump in on our approach.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because as a tech company, and we actually, the technology is at the end. We go in and our value proposition is we're going to look at your people,
Yep.
your processes, and if you can't show us how the process is going to work, don't try and automate it. The technology is always at the end, and the people piece, if you don't have the leadership, your organization isn't right. Because when we show up and somebody's going, oh my God, they're gonna fix the billing department, the whole accounting team goes, 3 people are going. No. What my job is we're gonna fix the billing department, but I'm gonna give you 4 hours back this week that you
Right.
can be more
You for
productive,
something
right?
else. Yes.
So it's that piece.
Increasing productivity.
100%.
Awesome. Bang on.
Yeah.
So you're 4 years in,
Yep.
right? Tell me a little bit about your team size, how you work, where you work.
We started out, as we're up to 3 or 4 consultants, contractors.
yeah.
We do very specific projects, and we have some fantastic customers that if you would have told me 2 years ago we'd have a customer, because they're big companies,
Right.
which, by the way, for the most part, are already doing a great job, but recognize we can do better. As opposed to trying to get the ones that we think need the help, but aren't quite ready. And you always hear, in 6 or 12 months.
Where's that tipping point? Is it good companies want to do better, and where is that tipping point for that company that goes, I know what I don't know what I don't know, right?
You know what? If I knew the answer to that, I'd have a lot more cash. But I think, honestly, like on a serious note, when you talk to these people, and I'm getting bolder in my journey with customers, because I'll talk with CEOs, leadership teams, and then you'll ask some of those questions, and I always hear, you know what, Mark, we love all those things because you talk about profitability, customer churn, employee engagement, we hit all the boxes. We love what you're saying, and in 6 to 12 months we'll be ready, because they're in the middle of this big project. We all live that dream. I'm now bold and I go, I don't think you're ever going to be ready. And sometimes I really offend people. It's like, well, you don't understand. It's like, no, I get it. The challenge is that these companies will often do this. The graph goes like this, and all of a sudden we're there, and it's not like they're not making money. They're doing all that. But what if there's such a focus on, and myself included, because you come from that sales, we got to keep driving revenue. We got to keep growing the company. What people don't realize is, like, what if you could improve efficiencies and add 1 or 2% on the bottom line? Then watch what happens.
Right.
All these other formulas kick in. So I think
it's a bit of growth by not just trajectory, but by cost cutting.
Correct.
Right? And time saving. Yeah.
So back, because I didn't say avoided, I skirted your question. On team size, we started out with really some marketing people and some subject matter experts.
Yeah.
The problem is when I engage in a customer in this very specific thing, I need a very specific skill set.
Yeah.
Most of those people that are really good in that space, I can't afford to have full time, and they don't want to work for me full time.
Yeah,
so
for
we
sure.
went from this vision of building this out to really, I have on our website, Query CX, you will see we've built what we call Query Collaborators. So I have I've got there's an organization called the Customer Experience Professionals Association. It's the who's who in that industry. The incoming chair of the board, she's on our advisory.
Yeah.
So we've got people that have, they come from the big world. We draw on their expertise to help drive our business, but then we have local practitioners that we can bring in as and when, and that affords us the opportunity to focus on the product roadmaps on the team. And I started out with an office, had all that stuff in Victoria, and now I'm back working out of home. And part of the reason I had the office wasn't even about building the team and the capacity. We had the beautiful boardroom, we had all of that, and it's like, nobody's ever here.
Right.
And I love my personal, because of how my life runs, I like to kind of have the office to go to, because I always think about, it's
Get
the
out of
separation.
home, be more productive over there.
But I've got a great friend, and we were sitting on my couch one night, and I was kind of making this decision, because of course it's financially, it's a cost, I can travel more, I'll save all that cash. And he just laughed, and because he knows me personally, and he looked, my desk was sitting in the corner, he goes, so what you're telling me is if you didn't have an office, you would stop thinking about your business all the time. It's like you never shut it off. And it's
of course.
Like, okay, valid point. So that said, we're as much as a virtual company, but we have folks in San Francisco.
Globally. Yeah.
We're working with the Center for Innovation Excellence in Mumbai to develop some machine learning people because they're not coming out of university fast enough. There's not enough programs created around that. and the Stanfords and those schools that have those programs, we don't have the budgets of the Apple Computers and the Ubers who are hiring those guys like year one. It's just like, you're not even getting a shot at those students, just like they're gone. So it's about how do we, even though we're not there on the funding and the revenue side, we have that classic challenge of how are you going to build up the capacity piece. And we have problems with our product identification tool, for example, that we didn't know 2 years ago going into it, because all of a sudden we're dealing with manufacturers that have, there's a client we're talking to right now, they have 300,000 parts. So, not to belabor the point and get off on a technical slant, but the logistics, and for those people watching that will understand the technical piece of our software, is you basically have to take some pictures of it, organize it into a database, and get it to serve up somewhere. So right now, that's a fairly manual process. We're starting to digital scan, but when somebody goes, we have 300,000 parts, let's assume you can do an image in 10 minutes. Now, I'm not a Harvard MBA, but 300,000 times 10 minutes, I don't think we can onboard a lot of clients.
Right.
So
yes,
we've kind of backed off, and now we're trying to think a production line with parts going by, getting scanned, and all that happening. So if we can solve that problem, that's the next. So we're setting that up as a net new company on Vancouver Island. What a great story, because all the R&D, we can work with there's higher education institutions here that have the digital scanning equipment that are kind of going, hey, and
like your boardroom, it's not being used.
We're a real life business
case. To make businesses
like
happen.
we have a problem we need to solve today.
Okay.
So
you talked about you're in Victoria.
Yes.
Okay. Let's talk about Victoria, British Columbia. Give me just a soundbite of what makes Victoria absolutely distinctive.
It's beautiful. So that's a bonus. The business climate, so I've been there now 24 years, shocking. And I would add to that I still spend a lot of time in the Lower Mainland.
Okay.
And the majority of the business that we're chasing currently is in the US, because that's where it showed up. So I'm there a bit. But if you can there seems to be a very open network in kind of the tech, transparent information sharing. There's a lot of really smart people on Vancouver Island in general. Lots of people that have done well. Maybe they've cashed out, exit or whatever, and then they get to Victoria. They're my age, mid-50s. They've got their dough, and then they're bored. So then you can find these people, whether they're on your advisor or your building.
So how do we get them here, Mark?
There's lots that are here. That's what, when I've kind of tied into the VIEA conversation here like this, there is the talent. I think there's a lot of talent here, right? And I think, what I just identified about in the machine learning space, to have those people, because when you hear this and some of the things we've listened to in the last couple of days, when they say things like, in the next 10 years, half of these jobs aren't going to exist. I get that. But the ones that are going to exist, we have to line up the talent pool and the educational system to actually be turning that out. We can all talk about big data, but it's like, what is, and my standing joke in what I'm doing, because I'm not a technologist, I probably know more than the average guy, but I say it all the time, like I can spell AI, I can spell IoT, but what does that actually mean, right? Because that's maybe that's a segue into the Internet of Things space, but and in fact, where we play, we're actually in the industrial Internet of Things, which is...
What does that mean? What's the difference between IoT and industrial IoT?
And the example I guess I would lay out is that from an IoT standpoint, to use the analogy of put a sensor on something, a piece of equipment. You kind of, maybe you track that. Maybe a company's tracking a tool on a job site so they don't lose it. That's kind of a one-to-one relationship, and I would put that's an Internet of Things application. Industrial Internet of Things, so some of the things we're looking at is like building management of so a whole tower gets built, office tower, picture that, downtown Vancouver. Day one, they kind of go, here's the keys, you now own the building. In the old days, it'd be like, oh, here's all these binders and your manuals and all that. Now we just kind of hand over a file that says, here's your parts list. It ties to your asset management. It's a whole holistic approach into the property and real estate space.
So now you're segueing into my interest, which is property technology, right? Okay,
correct.
Interesting.
Which again, I think, and interesting enough, we're talking to some big construction companies who are now hiring, like VPs of innovation.
Right.
And that kind of thing. So to answer again, I apologize, I'm good at doing this, but the industrial Internet of Things is, I would then go, let's look at, a factory. and encompassing all of those pieces in, and how do you look at your whole enterprise holistically? And some of that is, hey, if we can bring in all the sensors and do all these things, there's a company that's at this thing that does that for trains. It's a Vancouver Island company, you know, the train comes into the things, they're analyzing all the parts on the train. It's proactive maintenance.
Right.
So it's just a larger scale.
Right. Perfect. Well, I have a question about, we're here at the Vancouver Island Economic Summit. You volunteer on the board?
I do.
Okay. And how long have you been doing that?
This is year 4. I'm chairing the board this year.
Cool.
So that's exciting.
Nice. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Appreciate that, because I know it's a hell of a lot of work to pull 600 collaborators into a space and get some work done. What's your big goal with being involved at the Vancouver Island Economic Alliance level?
I think I'm going to be bold
Yay.
and speak on behalf of, I believe, the business folks
Yes.
that formulate the committees, and we're the guys sitting around,
Yeah.
and gals that are sitting around those tables, is that we believe with some of the work we're doing at VIEA is Vancouver Island's a beautiful place to live. There's lots of companies, lots of things that have been here, and the analogy I would make is, and I hate to say mom and pop because that sounds small, and there's lots of very successful businesses that we don't know about because they're exporting and they're doing all that. What we're saying is, you and I can start a company next week, and we are moving right along, and we encounter organic growth. So we kind of go along, and the company just clicks. We're now in a global economy, and everybody always goes, oh, if you're a tech company, you have to think global from the onset. True. We're in a global economy, period. If I'm the sandwich shop, I'm counting the local people. But on the larger scale, so the thought process is, let's move from organic to scale, and that's a mindset. And you've planning your company that way, and then growing into it, and doing all of those things, and that's taking all the great people. We may not have the infrastructure, the talent pool, but we can figure all that out and start it here. And there's lots of cases that we can do that, and we are doing that.
So, if I was to put that in a tweet, are you suggesting that we're looking at a whole entire region, taking this whole entire region and kind of running it like a company?
Well, that sounds a little out of the box, but yeah, absolutely.
Right? I mean, you're
100%.
looking at all of these pieces, right? And all the
100%.
dynamics of the talent, and the communities, and the governments, and the thing, and saying, hey, we can, like with the Island Good campaign, which is totally another topic, but we've increased sales 16% to see the best case of all of these people collaborating.
Correct. 100%.
Awesome.
Yeah, and that, you know what, there's the magic word you just delivered is the collaboration piece. And,
Right.
and I've heard it, and maybe I'm, biased to the VIEA organization because I'm involved, but there's people here from Victoria, because I think I'm working the Victoria market, putting my VIEA hat on. So we've got some more folks up from there this year, and I get people in here. It's like, what they're amazed at is the conversations that take place, right? They're open, they're transparent, and it's like we can actually get things done.
So if we've got a global audience right now, majority are Canadian, and we definitely have some American listeners, ironically Brazil, we have a lot of Brazilian listeners. What's the one thing that VIEA can offer to say, boom, as an open invitation, say we're open for business? What's the one message that you'd love to communicate to that whole audience?
And I think you might have just summarized it. We're open for business. Vancouver Island is open for business, right? Come to us with ideas. That's what we're saying. If you take the summit, the mandate of the summit, we have all these sessions and all that, it's to start conversations, because out of the conversations, we will start thinking at the board level of, so what sessions do we want to have next year? Not because we think this is a great idea, it's because we heard this 27 things.
Yeah.
The foreign trade zone that we were successful in getting Vancouver Island designated at last year, that started out as a group of guys. I was on that committee 3 years ago. That were folks in the advanced manufacturing space. They were all kind of looking at all these things. Eventually they went, hey, we all have this one, let's call it a pain point.
Pain point, yeah.
What if we did this? So we figured it out. We took the federal government to task. We challenged because we were the only non-government organization to get this designation, and we got the whole island. So in Ottawa, they're going, well, Victoria can apply, Nanaimo can apply, and we're like, nope.
No, we want to do it collectively.
We had to get a letter of support from every city and every municipality on Vancouver Island to submit that. That's collaboration.
Awesome.